Okay, so I checked out Newton and his three laws of motion, and in doing so, I could not help but see his work on gravity. And I figured I should get a book on the subject, since I knew very little about it, little or nothing. Let me tell you, it is a living hell reading a book that is very much smarter than you are. I was shaky, but all right, up through the Copernican revolution, in which the sun replaced the earth at the center of things. I held on while Galileo rolled his balls down inclined planes, and he was watching the lanterns hung overhead on chains going in pendular motion, while he was in church, supposedly deep in prayer. His prayer was science. He understood that gravity was a force which could be measured, but he could not explain it. Newton couldn't either, although he developed an equation to quantify its operation, including force, mass, velocity, momentum, and the constant acceleration of 32 feet per second. But he carefully offered no theory as to what gravity was or how it operated. He can only say it was a force of attraction, action at a distance. Sometimes the distance was small, as between an apple in a tree and the earth, and sometimes the distance was much greater, interplanetary, interstellar. Some people were troubled by Newton's conclusions. The force operating over a distance, that seemed to smack of the occult, spooky mysticism. And when it came to attraction, what did he mean? That objects somehow fancied each other? Yet he also had his supporters. One of them, the royal astronomer Edmund Halley, wrote in his introduction to the Principia, "Behold the pattern of the heavens, and the balances of the divine structures. Behold love's calculations, and the laws that the Creator of all things, when he was setting the beginnings of the world, would not violate. Religious devotion for scientific principles." Then we got to Einstein, and I learned that the work he published in 1905 that led to special relativity, E = mc squared, and the atomic bomb, that was piddling compared to the paper he published on November 25, 1915, titled "The Field Equations of Gravitation." This led to the theory of general relativity, his masterpiece, which says that the force of gravity is just a tendency of bodies to move along the warp of space-time caused by the distortion of the fabric of reality by mass. Got that? Einstein had an equation in this paper too, and it's a doozy. It appears to be simple, but the factors in it are called tensors, and a tensor, brace yourself, is a mathematical object potentially in many different dimensions that can be anything from a multi-dimensional matrix of values to a series of complex equations in its own right. Okay? At this point, I began to fade off into my own multi-dimensional matrix, but the book forged ahead. There is no link between quantum mechanics and general relativity. One answers questions about the atomic world, and the other does the same for space and the universe. Einstein spent the rest of his life looking for a unification, but it eluded him. By the way, science acknowledges four forces at work in the world: gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak forces of the nucleus. And of these, gravity is by far the most obvious and the weakest. And all we have are theories to explain it. To this day, no one knows what it is or how it does what it does. That's not from a lack of trying. As the book stated, many of the widely accepted components of our picture of the universe, the Big Bang, black holes, and dark matter, to name but three, are not the result of direct observation, but instead are theoretical entities that are supported by indirect observation, educated guesswork. The book went on to chart the investigation into other theoretical entities, like gravity waves and anti-gravity. Scientists have spent their entire careers and millions of dollars with no results whatsoever. The search for gravity waves that might not exist, using equipment that can be shown to be unable to detect them if they should exist. It takes a special kind of scientist to persevere under such conditions, the book notes. This as well. It is also the case that the constant effort of working on a project for year after year without producing anything must have an abrasive effect on the human psyche. And finally, this inability to be sure reflects a limitation of science, particularly when dealing with distant and indirect observation. And the same data can equally well support an alternative theory. As for my own psyche, I can say that gravity surely seems to exist, but as to how or why, I have no clue, and in that, I'm not alone.